Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jayo Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari, Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari. Jayo Radha Madhava, Kunja Bihari. Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Paribrajakacharya Stutarashata Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Abhaya Charanavinda Bhakti Vedanta Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai ISKCON Guru Vrinda Ki Jai Prem Se Kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shai Mukunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai Shri Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai Nu Govardhan Dham Ki Jai Ganga Maya Ki Jai Yamuna Maya Ki Jai Tulsi Devi Ki Jai Bhakti Devi Ki Jai Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai Prihat Mridanga Srila Prabhupada's Transcendental Book Distribution Ki Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan Ki Jai Prashadam Distribution Ki Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna. All glories to the divine lotus feet of Shri Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. What's the time schedule?
Ask the questions about
8:35. Okay, great. Thank you. Oops. Upside down. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nasta Praishu Badreshu Nityam Bhagavate Sevaya. Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. By regular attendance in classes on the Srimad Bhagavatam and by rendering service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So, We are reading from Canto 5, Chapter 19, Text 25. Just making sure. And since I'm relatively new in town, I beg a small indulgence. I just wanted to, just share how satisfying it is to be here with all of you. And sometimes when you're running a big operation, you tend to see what's going wrong because you have to. But sometimes as an outside observer, I just wanted to share. We had lived here for 24 years and seen different times of the temple's, history. And by Bhadranayan's mercy, His Holiness Bhadranayan Maharaj's mercy, he kind of kept us in the loop on his email threads, so we still have a little connection over the years. And it's just so enlivening, to see how the temple is going, and it just reminded me, Srila Prabhupada's mottos, like books are the basis, right? And I was really thinking like how, of course, it's always been going on, book distribution, but just my observation now is it's so much the basis of the temple, and basis means foundation on which all the other important activities are built, so we have preaching is the essence, right? So we see because books are the basis, devotees are going out and distributing books, and this is preaching. This is naturally how we preach, and this also inspires us to preach in so many other ways because going out, we're representing Srila Prabhupada, we're representing the previous acharyas, representing Lord Krishna. So this is a natural outgrowth, and purity is the force because when you're serving Krishna in these ways and serving the acharyas and serving Srila Prabhupada and serving our gurus in these ways, it's natural that purity develops, and utility is the principle. When one is engaging in devotional service in these ways, one becomes so enlivened that they're willing to do anything and everything, for the service of the Lord, So we see, so many devotees, all of you devotees living in the temple, so many good examples. Dravida Prabhu setting such a nice example of japa, meditating on Istadeva Sri Sri Radha Giridhari, chanting, very nice mood in the temple, so many devotees. Like that. Last night we went to the Thursday night and it was like, wow, I didn't even know that such people even existed anymore, such a group of spiritual seekers there, just really intent on learning. Vijay Prabhu just preaching Krishna consciousness for all these years, distributing books, just effortlessly sharing Krishna consciousness in a way that people got it, very deeply. And everywhere I look, you just see like stalwart devotees like Mahabharat and Dharmasetu and Mother Sampada and Pavamana, Bharat and Bhaktavatsala and Leela Shakti driving in from distant corners of San Diego County, doing tons of service, like that. So just everywhere I look, stalwarts that have just been here for years and decades like Janardhan and Balaram and younger devotees that are here that are so faithfully serving. So anyway, I just, it's not hyperbole. I just wanted to share, that it's a very inspiring atmosphere. And thank you. And I think also he's not here, so I can get away with trying to glorify him. That like His Holiness Bhadranayan Maharaj, he's been like this rock, this pillar. Like I was here at a Sunday feast in the summer of '78. And our temple president, Gunagrahi Maharaj at the time, Gunagrahi Prabhu at the time, was, he made an announcement. He had this Bhadranayan there, who had recently come and he was the Bhakti leader, and he said, well, actually, I'm taking Vanaprasth, and I just got this motorhome, and I'm taking off with a few brahmacharis to preach, and here's your new temple president, And that was the summer of '78, and he never looked back. I mean, he's been here, what is that, 44 years, right? He's been here just faithfully, serving, and through thick and thin. We had a ton of devotees. We had lots of money. Things were booming. All of a sudden, we had 5 or 10 devotees, and trying to keep the lights on in the building. But he never stopped. He never turned away. He just kept going through thick and thin. So, that type of leadership and all of your leadership and participation. So it just creates such a healthy dynamic. And anyway, I won't go on, but it's just very inspiring for us outsiders, to come and really witness this and, feel it and hopefully be a part of it, so in a small way. So anyway, so if I have a benediction for the younger devotees, don't grow old, you know. You have this bag with like 3 different pairs of glasses and aspirin and this and that, and you know, so may you serve Krishna with youthful vigor forever. So, I have a question, Dureta Prabhu. Is it Twiha? Do you pronounce it like that? The 2 Iha?
Are you looking at text 26?
25. The first line, Prapta Nrijatim, is it Twiha? Is that how you pronounce it?
Twiha, yeah.
Twiha.
Twiha.
Twiha, okay. Thank you. Prapta Nrijatim Twiha Ye Chajantavo. Let me try that again. Prapta Nrijatim Twiha Ye Chajantavo. Jnana Kriya Dravya Kalapa Sambritam. Navayateran Apunar Bhavayate. Bhuyo Vanoka Ivayanti Bandhanam. Prapta Nrijatim Tviha Ye Chajantavo. Jnana Kriya Dravya Kalapa Sambritam. Navayaterana Punar Bhavayate. Bhuyo Vanoka Ivayanti Bandhanam. Prapta Nrijatim Dviha Ye Chajantavo. Jnana Kriya Dravya Kalapa Sambritam. Navayaterana Punar Bhavayate. Bhuyo Vanoka Ivayanti Bandhanam. Prapta Nrijatim Tviha Ye Chajantavo. Jnana Kriya Dravya Kalapa Sambritam. Navayaterana Punar Bhavayate. Bhuyo Vanoka Ivayanti Bandhanam. Prapta Nrijatim Dviha Ye Chajantavo. Jnana Kriya Dravya Kalapa Sambritam. Navayaterana Punar Bhavayate. Bhuyo Vanoka Ivayanti Bandhanam. Prapta Nrijatim Tviha Ye Chajantavo. Jnana Kriya Dravya Kalapa Sambritam. Navayaterana Punar Bhavayate. Bhuyo Vanoka Ivayanti Bandhanam. Mataji's. Prapta Nrijatim Tviha Ye Chajantavo. Jnana Kriya Dravya Kalapa Sambritam. Navayaterana Punar Bhavayate. Bhuyo Vanoka Ivayanti Bandhanam. Okay, word meanings. Prapta, who have attained. Nrijatim, a birth in human society. 2, certainly. Iha, in this land of Bharata Varsha. Yea, those who. Cha, also. Jantava, the living beings. Jnana, with knowledge. Kriya, with activities. Dravya, of ingredients. Kalapa, with a collection. Sambritam, full. Na, not. Vai, certainly. Yateran, endeavor. Apunabhavaya, for the position of immortality. Te, such persons. Bhuya, again. Vanoka, birds. Iva, like. Yanti, go. Bandhanam, to bondage. Sorry, I'm just going to adjust a little bit my back. Bharata Varsha offers the proper land and circumstances in which to execute devotional service, which can free one from the results of jnana and karma. If one obtains a human body in the land of Bharata Varsha with clear sensory organs with which to execute the Sankirtan Yajna, but in spite of this opportunity he does not take to devotional service, he is certainly like liberated forest animals and birds that are careless and are therefore again bound by a hunter. Do you want to do the repeat? Or okay. Srila Prabhupada's purport and Srila Prabhupada's translation. In the land of Bharata Varsha, one can very easily perform the Sankirtan Yajna, which consists of Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, or one can perform other methods of devotional service, such as Smaranam, Vandanam, Archanam, Dasyam, Sakyam, and Atmanivedanam. In Bharata Varsha, one has the opportunity to visit many holy places, especially Lord Chaitanya's birth site and Lord Krishna's birth site, Navadvip and Vrindavan, where there are many pure devotees who have no desire other than to execute devotional service. Anya bilasita shunyam jnana karmani anabritam. And one may thus become free from the bondage of material conditions. Other paths, such as the path of jnana and the path of karma, are not very profitable. Pious activities can elevate one to the higher planetary systems, and by speculative knowledge, one can merge into the Brahman existence. But that is not real profit, for one has to come down again, even from the liberated condition of being merged in Brahman, and certainly one must come down from the heavenly kingdom. One should endeavor to go back home, back to Godhead, yanti mad yajinopi mam. Otherwise, there is no difference between human life and the lives of jungle animals and birds. Animals and birds also have freedom, but because of their lower birth, they cannot use it. Taking advantage of all the facilities offered him, a human being who has taken birth in the land of Bharata Varsha should become a fully enlightened devotee and go back home, back to Godhead. This is the subject matter of the Krishna consciousness movement. The inhabitants of places other than Bharata Varsha have facilities for material enjoyment, but they do not have the same facility to take to Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has advised that one who has taken birth as a human being in Bharata Varsha must first realize himself as a part and parcel of Krishna, and after taking to Krishna consciousness, he must distribute this knowledge all over the world. Om Jnanatamrandasya Jananjanan Shalakaya Chakshurun Militanyana Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So, has anybody been counting how many times Srila Prabhupada has referenced Bharata Bhamute Hole Manusya Janmayar in this chapter? This is a real theme, you know. This Bharata Bhumi, you know, that the opportunity being offered for spiritual perfection. So, you know, it's very. So anyway, for me, this is a very fascinating chapter, and this section of the chapter particularly regarding Bharata Varsha, this opportunity to attain life's perfection in really, what is a very easy way, and Srila Shukadev Goswami, he's, in this chapter referencing Srila Narada Muni, who's given us very practical instructions of how to take advantage of this opportunity for spiritual perfection, the Narada Pancharatra, the idea of how to engage our mind and senses very practically in the service of the deity, right? That it's been described how, the Bhagavat Vidhi and the Archana Vidhi, these are like the two tracks of the train. Very, very scientific process is being given to us so that in one short life, right, people can actually become Krishna conscious and, go back home, back to Godhead, right? So this is really valuable knowledge. This is spiritual knowledge. It's very valuable spiritual knowledge. It's coming. Look at the personalities. There's all kinds of knowledge, right? So like nowadays, it's kind of like, sometimes they say it's like the knowledge age. We're bombarded. Actually, there's too much. We're bombarded with all types of media. And according to the kind of knowledge one wants, there's a source out there, right? Like if you want conservative political views, you can go to Fox News. If you want liberal political views, you can go to CNN. If you want sports, you can go to, is it ESPN or, anyway, everything is very, very specialized. There's the cooking channel, there's the this, there's the that, right? And in those places, you find people that are regarded to be expert in those particular fields who will give you knowledge, right? Of course, sometimes we talk about the defect of the ascending process of knowledge. There are different defects there as opposed to the descending process where it's coming from pure higher sources like God and his representatives. And one of those is that we as conditioned souls have a cheating propensity, and this really came home to me. Neela, Madhava Badri's son, he works for a television station and a studio that puts on, and I remember him telling me, it was quite interesting because in America, politics has become such a thing, right? And he was telling me that the talking heads on these stations, they're kind of brought into conversations from all over the country. And if there's a talking head who's an expert on some point in San Diego area, they'll come into their studio where he works and they'll videotape them. And it's live feed, so it's going right into a discussion where another person with an opposing view might be in New York, this guy might be in San Diego, somebody might be in LA, right? So in the studio, they're having to bring all these people together, and he's saying, what you're seeing is one thing, they're having these big debates about, strongly held views. But he said, but behind the scenes, they're all just friends. Like the guys will come in and say, so what do you want today, And actually, he said, it's just political theater, So this cheating propensity runs very deep, and when you are gaining knowledge from those types of sources, it's a very imperfect knowledge, and that type of knowledge is not going to help anyone to attain life's perfection, to go back home, back to Godhead, even to have like Vijay was pointing out last night, a stress-free life, right? That type of knowledge doesn't free us from stress. Rather, the knowledge overload, it increases our stress at every moment, right? So, these things are going on. But here in the Bhagavatam, particularly in this chapter, looking at, we're hearing from spiritual experts, right? We're hearing from Shukadev Goswami. He's the son of Srila Vyasadeva. Srila Vyasadeva is the literary incarnation of Godhead. So Shukadev Goswami was his son, and he was hearing Srila Vyasadeva composing this topmost. The Bhagavatam is the mature fruit of all of Srila Vyasadeva's spiritual writings, right? Which he wrote on the instructions of his guru, Narada Muni. And he wrote it at a time when, even after compiling the entire body of Vedic knowledge, he was feeling unfulfilled. Just imagine that, the Vedas, the Puranas, the Mahabharata, the Upanishads, he's put all this together for the benefit of everyone, and he was feeling unfulfilled, right? And at that time, perfectly arranged, but Krishna's arrangement, Narada Muni comes and he diagnoses the problem. And he says, you haven't directly glorified the Lord sufficiently, free from all other narrations. And only that direct glorification of the Lord has the potency to completely cut through the dense darkness of the coming age, Kali Yuga, right? This is very, very powerful, right? When Srila Prabhupada was explaining the Maha Mantra, he said, this is a transcendental sound vibration, and it surpasses all, it goes right to the heart, right to the soul. It surpasses all lower strata of consciousness, namely sensual, mental, intellectual, like that. So these vibrations, Krishna Katha, Krishna Nam, like that, his form, his pastimes, these narrations, they can cut through all the muck, right? So Shukadeva Goswami is hearing this in the womb, and he's such a self-realized soul that he has no interest in material life. So he didn't even want to take birth. He stayed in the womb for 16 years. Finally, none other than Lord Krishna himself had to come. They actually had to call for Lord Krishna, who was on the planet, and say, please, this kid won't come out, And Lord Krishna reassured him, don't worry, just come out and speak this Bhagavatam, I'll take care of you, you won't fall into Maya, like that. He'd give this reassurance, right? So, who are these personalities? Narada Muni, right? He is able to travel all over the universe in his self-same body. Who can do that? Like these guys try to go to the moon, maybe, maybe not. And they have to wear these spacesuits with, every manner of facility to enable their body to live for a second out of the basic atmosphere of Earth, even to go up to the space station, 100 miles up or whatever, So Narada Muni, he's just, early in the movement, Mukunda Maharaj at the time, Mukunda Prabhu and Hayagriva, they got so inspired. They wrote this song, Narada Muni, the transcendental spaceman, Prabhupada encouraged them, So anyway, he's able to travel throughout the universes, both spiritual and mundane, in his self-same body. He's observing what's going on in the Vaikuntha planets, what's going on in Goloka Vrindavan, what's going on in Indraloka, what's going on in the hellish planets, right? And he's such a pure person that, everybody trusts him. He's dira adir. He's not envious of everyone, like we say about the 6 Goswamis. So you have him showing up and Kamsa listens to him. Hiranyakashipu listens to him, right? Indra listens to him. Everybody listens to him because he is the recognized authority on spiritual knowledge, right? So these personalities are extolling the great opportunity of taking birth in Bharata Varsha, right? And most recently, the demigods are speaking, right? And the demigods are speaking from realization, right? And on the one hand, we don't usually think of us in Bharata Varsha as being in such an elevated platform, but the devas are looking at it in a particular angle of vision, and they're saying, look, we live for millions of years. We sometimes get to see God, we get to see all these exalted personalities, but we have a really hard time because it's so enjoyable that we have a very hard time tearing ourselves away from the enjoying mentality so that we can actually take up this devotional service. But these little guys down here, they can go down there and take a birth for 100 years or less. And if they hear about Krishna from the lips of pure devotees, their whole lives can just be transformed in a matter of minutes, hours, days, weeks. We've seen this. There's been people who came to Hare Krishna temples and never left, right? Isn't it? There's stories like that. People came in and never left, or people who came and they came 3 or 4 times, right? People that came to Krishna Lounge, right, 2 or 3 times, and they're here 18 years later. You know what I mean? So this is the potency of this process. And this was predicted. Shukadeva Goswami, he listed all the sinful races, Kirata, Hunanda, Pulinda, Pukasha, Abhira, Shumba, Yavana, Kasa, Adaya, all of them, Adaya I think is us, and even others addicted to sinful acts. We're a little below the Mongolians. All of us addicted to sinful acts. If they hear about Krishna from the lips of a pure devotee, they can be brought to the platform of pure devotional service, right? So these are the personalities who are actually giving us this knowledge, this spiritual knowledge, right? So these demigods, they have this realization because in their long, long life, they see that people in Bharata Varsha can do that. Whereas here's a case study, right? And I used to say Nalakuvera, but Dravida Prabhu many years ago straightened me out, Nalakuvera, right? So these are very famous demigods, Nalakuvera and Manigriva, right? We learn about them in some of the most blissful pastimes of Lord Krishna's boyhood, right? They were standing in little baby Lord Krishna's yard as Yamala, is it Yamala Arjuna trees? And they were standing there for 36,000 years because of the all-merciful curse of Narada Muni. And at that time, by the blessings of that same pure devotee, Narada Muni, they were able to appear and actually witness Lord Krishna's childhood pastimes, right? And this was where they actually came to the point of pure devotional service by the grace of Narada Muni. But this is an exception, and if you look at this case study, I was thinking about it because they had lived a long, long time before that. If you read the Ramayana, there's a beautiful Apsara named Ramba, right? And Ramba was the wife of Nalakuvara. And she was raped by Ravana when Ravana was visiting that place, right? She was raped by Ravana. And because of that, Ravana was cursed that if you ever, by force, take a woman, you'll burst into 1,000 pieces, something like that. And he was aware of that. So, he very powerful, but he had certain little things that were like hovering around due to his sins and the reactions to those sins. But anyway, my point there is that Srila Prabhupada explains in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita that he spoke Bhagavad Gita to the sun god, who around 2 million years ago spoke to Ikshvaku, who was a earlier king in the line of that eventually Lord Ramachandra appeared, right? So Lord Ramachandra appeared in that same Treta Yuga. So this is at least like at least like 1 million years ago, up to 2 million years ago, right? So Nalakuvara was married, a couple million years ago to Ramba, and she was raped by Ravana, right? And then a little before 36,000 plus 5,000, so a little before 41,000 years ago, they were still in Maya. Nalakuvara and Manigriva were sporting in the gardens with Ramba and a whole bunch of her friends, right? They were having a good old time. And they were so intoxicated that they didn't even, same Narada Muni, he's always showing up. The same Narada Muni is passing through the garden on some important devotional activity. And all the girls, the Apsaras, immediately, oh my God, a saintly person, they covered up. But these boys, right, these boys who were like probably millions of years old at the time, these boys didn't even have the sense to cover their naked bodies. So Narada was like, all right, enough, And he gave them the blessing to become trees, because trees are used to standing around naked. So you're so dull that you want to stand around naked in front of a saintly person, okay, you got it, But he was so merciful. He was so merciful that he said, but you become a tree in this place. And 36,000 years from now, Lord Krishna will be appearing there, and you'll get to witness his pastimes, and ultimately you'll come to that platform of pure devotion. So the point I'm trying to share is that the demigods know this from their own practical experience, that although we have lots of good facilities, right, we have a hard time, buckling down and doing this thing, engaging in devotional service because of this kind of Aishvarya Bhav, like I want to be the controller, I want to be the enjoyer, I want to enjoy this wealth, this opulence, right? And they're looking down, seeing like these guys, there's sukha dukkha, like there's enough suffering and there's enough happiness to really see, this kind of situation and to actually experience that yearning that gives rise to, Vijay mentioned last night, the all-important questions. Who am I? Why am I here? Why am I suffering? What is the meaning of life? Prabhupada again and again says, this is the beginning of human life. Like these little animals, this is a really interesting statement. Prabhupada says, animals and birds also have freedom, but because of their lower birth, they cannot use it, right? So, ahara nidra bhaya maituram cha samanam etat pashubir niranam. So, pashubir, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending, these are the common activities for animals and humans, right? But for humans, because we're blessed with this higher intelligence, where we can actually discriminate and we can actually ask these questions, we can actually feel the pain, we can feel the pleasure, and we can realize that we're meant for much, much more than just kicking around in this material world. So we can come to that point. Animals can't, right? So that's, I think, why Srila Prabhupada is saying that. Although they also have freedom, because of their lower birth, they cannot use it. They don't understand how to use that freedom. And I noticed in different places, sometimes you'll go to a preserve, for instance, and the animals are protected. And sometimes you'll see the animals will come very close to people because they're so used to not being harassed by people, right? But they also don't have so much intelligence, so they might wander out of that preserve and then be prey to hunters and so many things, right? So that's the danger. So anyway, it's a very interesting point. So, the Devas here in these last few verses, they've been, just pointing out our good fortune. And in today's verse now, it's starting to be pointed out that it's continuing with the theme of these wonderful, wonderful facilities that are being offered. And an interesting point too, time's going fast, but an interesting point too is that, this Bharata Varsha of earth was being extolled even back then, like by Narada Muni and by the demigods. And in the recent purports, we're learning from Srila Prabhupada and Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur that like this whole opportunity of a human birth in Bharata Varsha just went into total overdrive with the appearance of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Lord Nityananda, the Panchatattva, because they took what was already the best opportunity in the universe and they said, okay, wholesale, Krishna consciousness, life's perfection, we're giving it out. Wholesale, right? There's an early letter. Prabhupada had come to America and he was struggling alone. You can read about it in the Lilamrita. And he was writing back to acquaintances in India. He was trying to get people to help to buy a building because he saw people were coming, people were participating. If you'll help, we'll get a building. We'll actually give these people a chance to come forward and engage in devotional service. So Prabhupada was writing to different, friends and acquaintances in India. And in one letter, he said, in our Bengal, Lord Chaitanya Nityananda, Lord Nityananda is famous for delivering in Jagai and Madai. And in our ISKCON society, we are delivering Jagais and Madais wholesale, like that, wholesale, So not one or two, wholesale. If you want one or two, you go to the mom and pop shop. If you want, you go to Costco, or, you go somewhere where they have these big, big bags of stuff, So Prabhupada was giving that understanding, right? So this is just taken this opportunity of taking birth in Bharata Varsha, and it's just brought it to this whole other level. Lord Chaitanya appeared along with his associates, the Panchatattva. They brought their weapons, the kartals, the mridanga drum, right? When the first mridanga arrived from India, you can read this, right? And it was in San Francisco. And Prabhupada, I think Mukunda Maharaj ran up and told Prabhupada, this box just came, and Prabhupada immediately came down from his quarters and they unpacked it, they got it out, Prabhupada was so excited and he began teaching Mukunda how to play mridanga, and Prabhupada actually said that Lord Chaitanya brought this from the spiritual world. So, Sango Pangashta Parshadam, the Lord comes with his weapons, his associates, his expansions, and his weapons. But in other incarnations, he's got the chakra, he's got the club. And Lord Chaitanya and the associates come with the mridanga and the kartals and the grantas, like that. So these weapons, so we're so fortunate because Lord Chaitanya has come, and there was a nice discussion yesterday. Dravitapur was pointing out these words, munificent and magnanimous, and all of these words which describe the profuse way and the complete way that Lord Chaitanya and his associates and the previous acharyas and Srila Prabhupada and now Srila Prabhupada's representatives, our gurus in ISKCON, and the devotees are profusely distributing Krishna consciousness. And only Lord Chaitanya is doing this because he is the Lord and because he is the most merciful incarnation of the Lord. He has brought a process which is simultaneously the easiest and the most sublime. It's easiest for neophytes like ourselves who are just on the threshold of the house of Bhakti, Srila Prabhupada says, and it's simultaneously the most sublime process even for the topmost transcendentalists like Shukadeva Goswami, like Narada Muni, right? Prabhupada was in London And, Prabhupada was like, all of a sudden he was cracking up during Arti, and the devotees were like, what's going on? And at the end, Prabhupada was like in this kind of very wondrous state, and he said, you did not see him? Devotees were like, duh, And Prabhupada said, during the kirtan, Narada Muni had come, and he was laughing and laughing, and he was so enlivened to see that these Westerners, were chanting and dancing. And Narada Muni's famous. He does these miraculous one-offs, like, Jara the hunter and Valmiki the bandit. And he takes these people that are like ready to rob you and kill you and throw you under the bus and turns them into like pure devotees who like write the Ramayana, who like sweep the ground before they step so they won't step on ants. Like, Narada Muni's famous in this way, and then he sees, here's Srila Prabhupada. He's taken Srila Bhaktisiddhanta's order. He's gone to the West single-handed, and he's got people chanting and dancing all over the world. So he came down to have a look, and he sees these guys, playing mridanga and kartals and chanting Hare Krishna and following the regulative principles, and look, beautiful Vaishnavas with shaved head and tilak, and he's laughing and laughing, and he's so enlivened, right? And Prabhupada said, saintly person comes, you must offer him a seat. So Prabhupada actually had them put an asana on the side of the altar. So when Narada Muni comes, he has a place to sit, right? So this is the perfection of taking birth in Bharata Varsha in this age. And I have to end. And in today's verse, they're beginning to turn the corner now. After extolling this opportunity, they're saying, so why would anyone not take advantage of it? And conversely, if anyone doesn't take advantage of it, if somebody gets a human birth in Bharata Varsha, especially in this Kali Yuga when Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has just appeared, if one doesn't take the opportunity, or if one walks away from the opportunity, it's like little animals who were liberated and then who became careless, right? And therefore, again, became bound by a hunter, right? So that we have to be very, very careful. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting, right? Purity is the force, and our purity comes from associating with devotees and from chanting the holy name, zeroing in on that association with Krishna through chanting the holy names, right? So we don't want to become, careless and wander off like little stray animals in the forest. And we also don't want the innocent mass of people to not get this opportunity. So this process is so amazing. It was Srila Bhaktisiddhanta told Srila Prabhupada many times to go preach. And he said, one time he said, it'll be good for you and it'll be good for all those who hear you, right? So this is our process, which Srila Prabhupada has given us. And it's also the process which Lord Chaitanya, again, has been quoted again and again in this chapter, that make one's life perfect by engaging in devotional service, by hearing about Krishna, learning about Krishna as it's given in the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, and then share this knowledge and this devotional perfection for the benefit of all others. And this is the magical part of our process, is that by doing this, by trying to share Krishna consciousness with others, our cup is continually being filled, right? Because we're going out there trying to share this nectar, but you need a lot of nectar to share with a lot of people. So our cup is continually filled by the grace of Guru and Krishna, right? We're trying to share Krishna consciousness, so our own supply just keeps increasing, right? That's the magic thing about Krishna consciousness, is that the more we share it, the more our own supply increases, right? So anyway, that's why I was saying at the beginning of the class, being so inspired by the example here, because you're all sharing Krishna consciousness so nicely, and as a result, you're over-brimming with Krishna consciousness. And when people like us come in your association, we just feel enlivened, it's very inspiring. And last night, I counted at one point, there were 60 people in that little house, right? 60 people in that little house. Some of them had their eyes closed, they were chanting with great attention, it was wonderful, it was like, wow, that kirtan, and Vijay Prabhu's explanation, is so nice, so this is our process. So anyway, already out of time, so we'll stop there, and if anybody has any corrections, comments, questions, there's a little time. Don't be shy. Zoom.
I just wanted to, because you weren't here, but there's one verse that is very relevant to this, soliloquy by the demigods up in their heaven planets, praising Bharata Varsha. And that is in 11th Canto, chapter 3, just a few verses after Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishnam, where the Yogendras, this is one of the Yogendras explaining the different avatars coming, and he mentions Lord Chaitanya, of course, in that verse. And then a few verses later, which is not so famous, but it's exactly in tune with this, where it's in Kaling Sabhaji Antyaya Guna Gyasara Bhaginaha, that those who are intelligent, they worship this Kali Yuga, because Yatya Sankirtanavya Sarvaswata Labhyate, in this age, because of the advent of Lord Chaitanya, Krishna Varnam Trisha Krishnam, they just spoke the birth, just by the process of Sankirtan, all one's svartas, the desires of the soul, the needs of the soul can be fulfilled. So it's this is part of the whole understanding of our position, is that we're so amazingly fortunate to have taken birth in this age. And even though we're not in Bharata Varsha, we remember how Prabhupada had to leave Bharata Varsha in order to plant the seeds and go back to Bharata Varsha and cause the explosion there. I'm just reading this biography of Yamuna. You may have read that,
Yeah.
Wonderful. So, she's describing the whole phenomenon of the party, Prabhupada's World Sankirtan Party. Went with him in India, the dancing white elephants, all the pandals, India just exploding. He's struggling, he starts plants the seed in New York and then goes to San Francisco and it increases, but then he gets sick and goes back. And then he comes back and eventually, after in 1970 or so, he starts the whole thing in India. And they finally, so many awaken to what the treasures that they've already had, and that's what this is all about, is that the demigods are realizing, they're so fortunate to be born in Bharata Varsha and praising it.
Thank you, Srila Prabhupada. It's a wonderful verse and wonderful sharing realizations. Sometimes I've heard too that it's said that, like, on the order of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada went to the Western world and actually spread this Krishna consciousness. That was the order of his guru, and that was the desire of the Parampara, and ultimately the prediction of Lord Chaitanya, Lord Nityananda, like that. But then to top it off, he went back to India, to Bharata Varsha, and as Javita was just so nicely explaining, he created an explosion there. It's just amazing. What Srila Prabhupada not only fulfilled the order, which was already like beyond anything anyone could imagine, but then he went back and topped it off by like making India explode with Krishna consciousness, and that's like, we go there now and we're just blown away. Balaram Prabhu?
Yeah, they asked Srila Prabhupada one time, why did you go back to India? Your guru gave you the order to spread Krishna consciousness in the West. Why did you go back to India? And Prabhupada's answer was, I already did that. Spread Krishna consciousness in the West, so I'm going back to India now.
Wow.
Anyways, that's in the 11th canto, Dravida Prabhu, that
Yes.
by the, right near that, okay, great. I wanted to ask, for the faithless materialists, these statements that we find in the Srimad Bhagavatam, like the glories of living in Bharata Varsha, how it's so wonderful, how it's so great, how we have such a great opportunity, the human form of life. For the faithless, these, this is just an exaggeration. Now, my question is, it's not that when one becomes a devotee, they will automatically, develop faith in such statements. I mean, hopefully they do, right? But my question is, how do we you could say, protect ourselves from this offense, because it's an offense to the holy name. The offense to the holy, one of them is to consider the glories of the holy name to be exaggeration. Because sometimes devotees may think, okay, yeah, sounds good. Bharat, Varsha, and all the glories of the holy name. It sounds good, but I'm not experiencing it. And, then they start doubting, and then they start falling into this, it's an exaggeration. So maybe you could comment on that, how to protect ourselves from thinking, oh, this is just a big exaggeration.
Yeah, I'll try. One way, I guess, would be to, meditate on the example, right? So, for instance, one son of Bharata, Varsha, right, Srila Prabhupada, if you study his life as it's outlined in the Lilamrita, and more memoirs and biographies are coming out, if you study his life, here you see somebody who, Prabhupada says in one place, fortunately both our spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, and our humble self had the good fortune to appear in Vaishnava families that produce pure devotees generation after generation, right? So Prabhupada was putting on Ratha Yatras as a boy, right? From the very beginning of his life, he was surrounded by the type of association that we're reading about in terms of the glories of taking birth in Bharata Varsha, right? It's an atmosphere where there was still some semblance of Varnashram, where people still saw their life in terms of duties which were designed to help people reach life's ultimate goal of life, right? And beyond that, Prabhupada was born in a Gaudiya Vaishnava family where not only was the goal of life understood, but it was highlighted and fully facilitated, with the processes of kirtan and deity worship. So Prabhupada, as a 5-year-old boy in that environment, he had the inspiration to start putting on Ratha Yatras, right? And they were so big that, like, Gaur Mohan's friends were joking, like, why didn't you invite us? Oh, just a child's festival, but like it's like the biggest thing in the neighborhood, And Prabhupada was doing that year after year, you know what I mean? So all these things are there, and okay, so he went to college, right? And he got a big position because he was very bright, and he didn't stand for his diploma because of a conviction, and that's also quite respected. And then he was hired by somebody who was developing one of the biggest businesses in India at the time. I mean, it was becoming a very big concern. It was a whole new world of medicine and, mass production and like that. So how old was Prabhupada? He was like 25 years old, right? Just married, and 1 or 2 small children. And he was put in charge. There was some envy in the company because this young guy suddenly got put like above all these old guys, But anyway, he was doing that, and he was diligently doing it, and he was doing a great job. But then his friend, Narendra, I believe, dragged him to go see this sadhu, and Prabhupada had enough of sadhus because Gaur Mohan was so liberal, he would feed like 6 sadhus a day, and over the years, Prabhupada noticed a lot of them were, you throw on your saffron in the morning and go out and beg, and go home at night and throw on your white and eat chapatis and puris, so. And smoke bidi, So, Prabhupada was, like, yeah, there's some sadhus, but, so many sadhus are there, But his friend dragged him, No, this guy's special. We want your opinion, like, you're the leader of the group, and we want to know, what do you think of this guy, So he went there, and after that one meeting with Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, right, Prabhupada said, not officially, but in my heart, I accepted him as my spiritual master. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta had the very first meeting, told him, you're intelligent young men, you should preach Krishna consciousness all over the world in the English language. And Prabhupada was like, wait a second, and he gave his argument of why Swaraj had to come first. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta expertly pointed out that nothing can wait for Lord Chaitanya's mission. And from that one meeting with the pure spiritual master, Prabhupada, within a couple days, from what I've read, correct me if I'm wrong, but within a couple days, he went back to the office and resigned. And like Dr. Bose was like blown away, like, you have this huge position, you're doing a great job, you're resigning? You know what I mean? You're 25 years old or 26 years old, you have a wife and 2 kids, and you're resigning? And Prabhupada explained, I met my spiritual master, he has a mission. If I'm working for you, then my mission has to be your mission. But I want to make my mission his mission. So I feel that I have to become self-employed so that I can manage my time, because whatever time I have beyond taking care of the family, I want to push on my Guru Maharaj's mission. I mean, this is like after one meeting. You know, he got initiated 11 years later, you know, but like Prabhupada's conviction was from that moment. And Dr. Bose was like, wait, I need you, you know. So if you won't manage my factory, you can be independent, have your own business, but become an independent distributor. I'll put you in charge of my products for all of North India. You know, he didn't want to lose them, you know. So, you know, so here's a son of Bharata Varsha, right? And then when everything was complete, you know, Prabhupada, throughout his Grihastha life, he was serving the mission of his spiritual master. So many examples are there. We don't have time to go into them all, right? And then when everything fell apart, right? When everything fell apart in the Gaudiya Math, and 30 years went by, and this mission that everybody knew of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta was unfulfilled. And by, Prabhupada went through the stages of life, and he took, on the order of Srila Bhakti Siddhanta, who was coming to him in dreams, take sannyas. Prabhupada took sannyas, right? And then he actually took it up against all odds, against physical odds, against financial odds, against visa odds. I mean, like, you know, we all know the story, you know, against all odds, Prabhupada came, heart attacks on the ship, so many things, you know what I mean? And Prabhupada tolerated everything. And one son of Bharata Varsha, you know, came here. One lecture Prabhupada explained, and this is a great secret of success in devotional life. Prabhupada said, Chakudano tiloye, Guru Mukha Padma Vakya, Chitteti Kore Aikya. And he said, Chitteti, it means heart and it means consciousness. And he said, the disciple in his heart understands, my Guru wants this, I have to do it, boss. Prabhupada said, my Guru wants this, I have to do it, boss. And then Prabhupada said, it is not my pride, but for your understanding, I will tell you, amongst all my God brothers, I did it. Prabhupada said that. He said, I did it. Yeah. So this is a secret of success in devotional service. Prabhupada said, my Guru wants this, I have to do it, boss. Everybody knows boss, right? Finished. The last word, right? My Guru wants this, I have to achieve it, finished, right? Very simple formula, right? But it wasn't simple to fulfill the formula, right? We look at Prabhupada's life, everything he went through to carry out that order of his spiritual master. And as devotees always point out, as a result of that one son of Bharata Bhumi coming out and doing exactly what is being recommended for sons of Bharata Bhumi to do, we're all sitting here in San Diego and LA and New York and Moscow and Ulaanbaatar and you name it. Ulaanbaatar, Mongolia, right? Everywhere. Kasa, Adaya, Kasa, the Mongolians, right? So all over the world, right? That prediction of Lord Chaitanya, Pritiviti, Achayata, Nagaradigram, every town and village, the holy name will be sung, right? So one son of Bharata Bhumi came out, and as a result, I mean, I was in the airport in Miami, this is about 5 years ago, and I ran into our old worshipful friend Bhattahari Prabhu, and I was just flying in from selling paintings in the West Indies, and he was flying in from Ulaanbaatar, from Mongolia, where he had just gone with Indradyumna Maharaj and spent about a month and a half doing the first Harinam Sankirtans in every town and village in Mongolia. Devotees had finally gotten permission. And that whole yatra began because one young man went out of Mongolia to college, and on the way back, you know, Vijay's, or somebody stopped him in LAX and said, excuse me, sir, did you get one of these, you know? And he had a Bhagavad Gita, as it is in his hand, and he's reading it on, you know, it's a long flight from LA to Ulaanbaatar, so he's reading this, and he's like, oh my God, this is like the most important knowledge I've ever read, you know? And he gets back, and he's a college student, so he's, you know, U of M, you know, and it's not University of Michigan, but, you know, Mongolia. So he's telling his buddies, you know, this is amazing stuff, you know, and 2 or 3 are reading it. Next thing you know, he has a whole reading group, you know, and then for like a year or two, they're just, you know, like you hear those stories about Bhagavad Gitas in the USSR before, you know, like they're threadbare, you know. So then the BBT gets a letter. You know, we're a group of students at University of Mongolia, and Prabhupada says again and again that, you know, you have to take initiation from a bona fide spiritual master. He keeps talking about chanting japa. How do we get beads? Where do we find a guru? You know, like very practical questions. So devotees are like, okay. So they started reciprocating with them, you know. And it took years, you know. It's a not the easiest country, but by that time, anyway, Bhata Hari Prabhu, they had gotten all the permissions, and they did the first Harinam Sankirtan. And he told me that, like, every town and village they went to, I mean, everybody would just run out and start chanting and dancing with him, you know, in Mongolia, right? So, anyway, if that doesn't build faith in these statements, I don't know what will. But, like, if we study the example of one son of Bharata Bhumi, Srila Prabhupada, and what he accomplished just by what's, you know, I have no other answer. I don't know. Maybe somebody else can answer it more fully. But does that make sense? You know, because that's proof. You know, in my book. Janavi? She had one real quick. You might have to press a button.
Okay, this might sound elementary, but when you were reading about Bharata Varsha, at first I thought it meant India, but then it sounded like it meant this whole Earth planet. So can you explain what Bharata Varsha, what that means, how it got that name, like Bharata Varsha, Bharata Bhumi? Because that might not be clear for people that don't
Well, I'll make a
understand what that
stab at
means.
it, and I might not be right, and I can be corrected by my superiors. But Bharata Varsha particularly is India, right? And at the same time, in a broader sense, like Dravida was pointing out, Prabhupada actually came out and kind of has spread this all over the world and then went back there. So that good fortune has been shared, you know, I guess that's the point. You know, like in other words, the people of Bharata Varsha, as Lord Chaitanya ordered, are meant to make their life perfect by Krishna consciousness and then share it for the welfare of all others. And Krishna consciousness is such an infectious disease, right? When they had that book fair in Moscow, and I think it was 76, and eventually they got kicked out because the communists realized they were religious books. But by the time they did, a lot of people had been exposed to Prabhupada's books. And when they gave the report to Prabhupada in India, Prabhupada said, the poison has entered and there's no cure, you know? So this Krishna consciousness, as it's meant to be perfected by people from Bharata Varsha and spread all over the world, it's so infectious that it kind of creates that same atmosphere wherever it goes, you know. So that's why you see all these temples of Krishna consciousness, these are like holy places, you know. His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he made it a point to leave this world from Gitanagari. Generally people, we know we go back to Vrindavan or Mayapur, try to leave our body in that altar sanctified atmosphere. But he was also making a point that all of these temples and farms and communities Prabhupada has given us, these are holy places. You know, these are tirthas, these are like that. So that spiritual atmosphere of Bharata Varsha has been spread all over the world in its purest element, you know what I mean? Like the perfection of taking birth in Bharata Varsha is now there if you take birth in San Diego and you come to Krishna Lounge or you come to the Sunday feast and you associate with the devotees and it goes into your heart. And like, it's the same thing, you know? Is that Dravida Prabhu? Thank you.
I had that same kind of a question. Bharata Varsha, because you know Bharata Varsha is known as the whole earth at a certain point.
Right.
But it's very clear if you read back a few verses, because they name all these rivers and mountains that are there in India. And then a few verses later, and maybe the next verse, it probably mentions Bharata Varsha, India.
Right.
It's right there in the translation.
Right.
So that's in this case, he's talking about that tract of land. India.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And Prabhu, you had something from the internet? Thank you. And we'll end after
Hare
this.
Krishna, Vijay Krishna Prabhu, you can go ahead. Someone in the internet, he's going to ask the question.
Okay.
Yes, Vaikuntha Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, my humble obeisances.
My obeisance is
Dandavat
back.
pranams. Prabhu, my question is, how do you explain that although a devotee is practicing the process of Krishna consciousness very rigidly, still it may take millions of lifetimes for him to finally become admitted into the kingdom of God? Do you believe that we could do it in just one lifetime?
Well, on the one hand, I'm not qualified to answer this question. On the other hand, we've been assured that it is possible by Srila Prabhupada. So, and if you, again, what is that? Palina parachiyate, right? You judge a little Bengali proverb, you judge a thing by the fruit it produces, right? Palina parachiyate, you judge a thing by the fruit. So if we see that people all over the world, there's one nice little glimpse of Srila Prabhupada's mission given by Harisari Prabhu in his memoirs. Once he was passing by Prabhupada's room, and he was Prabhupada's personal servant, and we all know that while we were all sleeping, right, after preaching all day, Prabhupada would go to bed around 10, get up around midnight, and while we were snoring, Prabhupada would be translating the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? So, and generally, that very sacred time and space, nobody would interrupt. A, nobody was awake, and B, nobody, if they were awake, would dare to interrupt Srila Prabhupada while he was translating, because they knew that his time was so valuable, right? And Harisari happened to be awake, and he was passing by Prabhupada's room, and the door was a little bit open, and there was a little light coming out, and in that light he could see Srila Prabhupada, and he was stopped, and he was very intently concentrating. He was speaking into the dictaphone, but he had stopped, he paused, and he was appeared very intent. And Harisari normally wouldn't say anything, but he was so moved by that he said, "Prabhupada, you appear to be concentrating so intently." And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, it takes great concentration to put things perfectly for the understanding of the common man, right? And so this is something that Srila Prabhupada has done. He's actually written his purports in such a way that common men and ladies all over the world in this very common age, right, can understand the highest precepts of Krishna consciousness and internalize them and run with them and make them a part of their life and mold their life in such a way that they become Krishna conscious. So this is the fruit that Prabhupada has given Krishna consciousness, right? Like we say, essential truth spoken concisely is true eloquence. Prabhupada has so eloquently given this topmost gift of Krishna consciousness that people all over the world are getting it. So from that, we can understand that although, as you pointed out, it can take millions and millions, we don't know, countless lifetimes to attain the perfection of life, Krishna consciousness. And even for devotees practicing, it may take a long, long time. But we have to have that faith that seeing how we are advancing in Krishna consciousness and the devotees around us are advancing in Krishna consciousness. And from that, we can understand that whether it's in one life or two life or however many lives, that following this process is firmly putting us on the path to our life's perfection of Krishna consciousness. Is that okay?
Oh, Prabhu, better as expected, better than okay, very helpful, outstanding answer to my question, Prabhu. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
You're very generous, Hare Krishna. So we'll end with that.
You're most welcome.
Hare Krishna, thank you. So we'll end there because of the time. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, glories to Srila Prabhupada.